For a long time, he was the head of that department, the Department of Mass Communication. And as the head of the department, he has made significant contribution to the development of this department in the direct teaching and administration in general. His host himself is a student. I'm a student of Dr. Abdulhamid Impoza. For the 3 years I was doing that course of science mass communication at the Islamic University in Uganda, he taught me for all the semesters, for more than one course unit every semester. So his contribution in the teaching at the university can physically be recognized by looking at me. There are so many of his contributions in the field of journalism by our presenter today. Maybe with time, we shall be able to share more. Today, let me stop there as far as his contribution is concerned. He is currently pursuing his PhD in media studies or communication studies, to be specific, from Pakistan. And we hope very soon he will be completing and come back here, inshallah. He is a member of Alhidaayah Foundation, which foundation is the organizer of this camp. As you may be aware, Alhidaayah Foundation is more than 20 years old, and a foundation that is operating in Uganda, engaged in many activities. Among others, we can talk about the mentorship programs, especially to the students. You are witness to this. And so we thank Alhidaayah Foundation for this. And we thank our day's presenter because he's part of those who carry out these mentorship programs. The topic before us is talking about the Palestinian plight, and to put things in context, I would like to call attention to what is going on in Gaza and the entire Palestinian land in general. But before that, I wanted to attract your attention to the many developments worldwide in recent history that are closely related to what we are seeing today. And I know details. What we must understand is, as Muslims, we have a very, very strong attachment to this land. You know, this land hosts Masjid al-Aqsa, and it is among the three most important places of worship in the faith of Islam. This is a place where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, ascended to heaven in what we know as Isra wal Miraj. So it is that very important place. Some people may think that it is all about the Palestinians, but it is something you cannot detach from the entire Muslim community. Like I said, for us to understand what is going on in Gaza and the West Bank in general, we need to think about the other developments elsewhere. In Myanmar, call it Burma, we are aware of what is going on. The persecution of the Rohingya Muslims, close to 1 million have been forced to become refugees in the neighboring Indonesia, forcing them out of their homeland. The developments in Kashmir, that is a Muslim majority populated place between Pakistan and India. You know what is going on by the Indian government, the way they are persecuting Muslims. Our brothers in China, we know them as the Uyghur Muslims. The way the Chinese government is treating them, including forced abortion, forced sterilization. They are subjected to torture, forced labor, gang rape, among others. There are so many examples we can talk about when we relate to what is going on in the Palestinian land. The massacres that have happened in the recent history, as we have said, there are so many, but we can only mention a few because of time. You remember the 2013 rubber massacre in Egypt? Some of these massacres are being carried out by our fellow Muslims, while others are spearheaded by the other people. We have talked about the Kashmir region and what is going on there. But the long history of Muslim persecution did not start yesterday. It started some time back. At the very time our Prophet declared his mission, and that is the mission of spreading the concept of monotheism. Since then, the persecution is started, and they have been going on. We just have certain times where we see extraordinary persecutions and massacres, but there is no single day that Muslims are not massacred worldwide. You remember what happened in Spain and the neighboring countries when the Christian church took over that land from the Muslims? The millions who were killed, others forced to migrate from Europe to Africa, especially North Africa. And those who stayed behind were subjected to forced conversion from Islam. Others were imprisoned, and so many other forms of torture were subjected to them. So as Muslims, when we talk about the plight of Palestine, we can all accept that the entire Palestine is almost flattened now, since October 7th is what is very popular now as the climax of these tortures, destruction of the Palestinian land. But like I have said, since the creation of the State of Israel, there has been continuous destruction and massacres in the Palestinian land. I understand my presenter is going to give the details in most of these issues I've talked about, but now I understand that we have now the topic under discussion in context, and before he comes in, let me request you accept that we have a video of about 3 minutes just to give us a highlight of what is going on currently in Gaza. Just a few things. Thank you. Mm. Sheikh Mpoza, we are requesting that you remove your screen. You stop screen sharing as we play this video.
You can't use anything. It's not just the noise inside, it's not a stress. The sound of the game just relates. Yeah. Is this you are precious? But before she can be placed in board, she passes out on the shoe. This one is driven over before the blue t-shirt. You've been told to get up. But
Thank you so much for your attention. Let me call upon our presenter to take on the floor.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wa rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. I'm so grateful to Allah for having enabled us to gather for the purpose of discussing an important subject about the Muslim community. As we are all aware that as Muslims, we are brothers and sisters. Once we profess kalimatu shahada, la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, we build a brotherhood that transcends the racial differences, height, and other aspects that one would look at. I'm so grateful to my brothers and sisters in Uganda who sat down and thought about me as one of the contributors to this year's students' camp, which is taking place at the IUIU Females Campus. I pray to the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our discussion and to enable us to have fruitful time to discuss matters that will add value to our understanding and to the Muslim community at large. This subject is a very complex one in terms of hello, Mr. Dumba. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, the subject in terms of scope is a very, we can say is a very wide topic, but I actually looked at it in a way. The organizers of this particular camp outlined the key aspects that must be outlined or must be emphasized. Number one, we shall be looking at Islam, Muslims, and Palestine in brief, because these three aspects, if you are to elaborate them, it would actually take a lot of time. But we shall have some few minutes to discuss that. And then we shall also go at the historical issues. And the historical issues, I can say that actually the history of Palestine and the related issues is also very broad, but I have summarized all the matters in 3 slides, which I will begin with as opening remarks, so that if somebody loses focus as we move forward, at least he would still remember the gist of the presentation. The third aspect is to look at some of the contributors to the Palestinian cause. And the fourth one is our individual and community roles. What is our responsibility? And then finally, the conclusion. Now, what I have considered to be my opening remarks are based on a scan through of the documents and a number of websites detailing the historical aspect of Palestine. And after looking at all of them, I came up with these points, which can help us to understand what is happening in Gaza today. As we speak now, I have just watched Al Jazeera. 70 people have, actually Palestinians have been bombed today in one of the refugee camps. 70 are dead. So that is what is happening today. I'm beginning to say that what is happening in Palestine today are the outcomes of the Balfour Declaration of 1970. It was engineered by Zionists with the British government and endorsed by USA and France. By then, US was actually led by President Woodrow Wilson, and France was just a French diplomat who wrote a letter confirming that they were in agreement of establishing a Jewish state in Palestine. So the objective of this declaration was to create a Jewish state at Mr. Dumba. Yes, I think somebody was tampering with my audio. So the objective of this declaration, it's very important for my brothers and sisters listening or watching me now to understand this declaration, because it is the starting point for what we see today. That Britain is influenced by the Zionists inside the British government to come up with this declaration. And this declaration, of course, it was during the World War I. So by then, Palestine was under the Ottoman Empire, and of course, the Ottoman Empire had lost. So all the losers during the World War I, the territories were going to be divided among the victors. So Britain started to empower the Jews and started to send them to Palestine with a bigger vision of making them dominant over the indigenous people. So this is where everything starts. That by 1917, you have a declaration, and the objective is to create a Jewish state, and the movement was within Britain and other parts of Europe to establish a Zionist state in a place of Palestine where there were indigenous people. So that's a very important point to appreciate what is happening today. Now, the Jews from the Eastern Europe came to Palestine with a clear motive of ethnic cleansing as a retaliation to what had happened to them in Europe and their mentality of proclaimed supremacy. So today, we are seeing a genocide. We are seeing ethnic cleansing, that Israel is forcing Palestinians to move out of Gaza, go to Rafah or to the Sinai desert, to go to other neighboring countries. So this is actually the motive. Clean up the entire region and establish the Jewish state. So this was the motive of the Balfour Declaration. And Britain was facilitating it, empowering the Jews to come to Palestine, and they started to come from 1917. And by 1947, they had already been empowered to take over that region. I want to draw your attention to this statement, which I got from Britannica.com. The Nazis, for instance, regarded the Jews as members of a subhuman race and dangerous cancer that would destroy the German people. So I extracted this from a write-up which is uploaded on the Britannica website. And this statement implies that the Jews in Europe were being harassed and they were being degraded by the Nazis, and they were considered to be like subhuman race, and they were supposed to be chased. And that's why there were a lot of forces within Europe to create for them a state where they could possibly have independence and run away from the persecution that was happening there. So it is not surprising to hear the Israeli defense minister calling Palestinians human animals, because it seems that they are retaliating whatever happened to them in history. they now want to revenge in the current days. Whatever they are doing to the Palestinians, it's what happened to them in Europe. So I'm getting this from the historical perspective. The resistance of Palestinians, which is happening today and what happened in the previous years or for the period of 75 years is obvious and justified because they were the indigenous natives of the area allocated to the Zionists. And this allocation was made by Britain. Now, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, which is called the Ottoman Empire, or the Khilafah, gave Jewish state project ample opportunity to thrive. Because after the collapse of this Khilafah, it meant that the Muslims globally had lost the strength. They had lost the voice that would come up and rise against any kind of injustice made. And the absence of this unified Muslim leadership or voice is actually a major reason for the impunity of Israel today. So Israel is succeeding in whatever it's doing with this kind of impunity that I can see because the Muslim leadership is nowhere. If one country comes up like Qatar or Turkey, and when other countries are silent, it might not actually be effective, just like if it was a unified voice of one leader from the Muslim world or from the Muslim Khilafah commanding an action. So the absence of the unified Muslim leadership is one of the reasons why Israel is enjoying the killing of people that is happening today in Palestine. So it is sure of the existing weaknesses within the Ummah. So that's why it can do whatever it is doing without any kind of fear. The other important point to observe is that Europe is suffering from the guilt of the anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is, of course, the kind of a movement that, or the way how the Jews were segregated. And this segregation, it was actually very popular in Europe. So because it was in Europe, the European countries today are seeming to be supporting, or they are supporting Israel because they know what they did to them. They know what they did to the Jews before. So they are supposed to have what we can call, is like a must kind of support that they are getting from Europe. Because these atrocities, they are committed to them, and now they are retaliating, as we said before. So these points can really help us to understand the present. In summary, the period from 1948 to 2000 has been characterized by wars, because when the Israel was declared as an independent state in the UN General Assembly, from that time onwards up to today, we can see the following aspects as the characteristics of what is happening. One, we are seeing wars. From 1948 onwards, we had the expulsion of the Palestinians. They fled their homes and they were forced by the Israeli militia to get out of Palestine, and they became refugees. About 750 plus, they were actually pushed out of Palestine. We are seeing the killings day by day. I've just told you today that 70 are dead, and actually the total number of deaths now is above 20,000. So, and those ones are actually the ones that can be counted, but you cannot actually have the exact figure because of the people who are buried by the rubble over the buildings that are collapsing. Expulsion of natives. It's one of the aspects that have been happening since 1948. Land grabbing or illegal settlements. It's one of the characteristics. in the West Bank, in Eastern Jerusalem, in Western Jerusalem, these are settlements. They are illegal, and we shall see the maps to indicate these settlements. Detentions of Palestinians, because the Jews are aware that they are on illegal land, because the people who were there, they were like disregarded as if there were no human beings on the land that the Jews occupied. We are also seeing fruitless negotiations, especially between PLO and Israel with the mediators. We are seeing multiple unfulfilled UN resolutions. I was reading about 18 resolutions just about Jerusalem. 18 resolutions made by the UN General Assembly, and they are not fulfilled. There are a lot of resolutions that are establishing the two-state solution in the UN, but they are not implemented as of now. Resistance has been one of the aspects that since 1948, actually not 48, the moment this declaration, the Balfour Declaration, was made in 1917, the resistance in Palestine started. Resistance, sufferings, endless atrocities committed by Israel with full support of the USA, Britain, France, and Germany, and other countries. So in summary, these are the happenings that have been characterizing this region. So this two-state solution is the desired goal, but it is always blocked by both Israel and the USA. So this is what I can consider to be the summary of the entire presentation. And now let's go to other aspects. The other aspects that we can say that Islam and Palestine Islam, Muslims, and Palestine. Palestine is an issue that we consider to be a Muslim's issue. In other words, talking about it is an obligation because it is part of us as a community and part of our religion. Muslims in West Bank, for example, including East Jerusalem, they are constituting 85%. And in Gaza, 99%. And by 1914, Palestine had about 335,000 Muslims. So if you look at all these figures, you can easily see that this issue of Palestine is a Muslim's issue, because majority of the people who were in Palestine before and now are Muslims. So the enemies of Islam are striving to detach the non-Arab Muslims from the Palestinian issue. They usually call it the Arab-Israel conflict, Arab-Israel conflict. But this is actually a gimmick. And actually some of the Arabs also take it that way, and they want to keep other Muslims from other nations actually to talk about this matter, that, you know, this is not your issue. But it is our issue because we are Muslims. So believers, men and women, are but brothers and sisters. So when the Muslim land is attacked, repulsing the attackers becomes jihad. So that's why we see that the current resistance in Palestine is part of our deen, that once you are attacked for your property, for your life, for your family, defending the family or property or your land is jihad. We are quoting hadith from Sa'id bin Zaid, reported that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever is killed in defense of his wealth is a martyr. Whoever is killed in defense of his family, himself, or his religion is a martyr. This is Sahih Hadith from At-Tirmidhi. So that is very important to understand why Muslims are concerned about this issue of Palestine. It is because we are Muslims and this is an Islamic issue. Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, as my brother Ahmad talked about this at the beginning, that Masjid al-Aqsa is in Jerusalem, which is part of Palestine. And Masjid al-Aqsa is considered as a sacred place from Surah al-Isra. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلة من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله. So this place is blessed. So and this masjid is in Palestine. So that's why we are concerned as Muslims about this region. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has also described this place, the Palestine, as the general region. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was instructing Musa to tell his people that, "O my people, enter the Holy Land. Ya qawmi, idkhulu al-ard al-muqaddasata allati kataba Allahu lakum." You should enter the Holy Land, Palestine, which Allah has assigned to you. So this is a sacred place from Quran and from the historical aspects. Al-Quds, there is Masjid al-Aqsa, and we know that praying in this masjid, the prayer that you conduct from there or you perform from this masjid, is equivalent to 250 prayers which are performed elsewhere. So that is another important aspect which makes it as Al-Haram al-Sharif. So Dajjal, Masih al-Dajjal, and we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guard us against Masih al-Dajjal, will not enter in this city as well. And hadith is from Ahmad. Dajjal will also be killed by Prophet Isa alayhi salam towards the gates of this place, Al-Aqsa. So this is another hadith that the Dajjal will be killed from this place or from this area, because we know that Isa alayhi salam will come and also be profess Islam and will also mobilize people towards Islam. Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was taken to Bayt al-Maqdis on this night of Jani, or during the Al-Isra wal-Miraj, and that verse has been recited and quoted as well. And this Bayt al-Maqdis, or Masjid al-Aqsa we are talking about, is in Palestine. Al-Quds was also the first Qibla of the Muslims for about 16 or 17 months, according to a hadith transmitted by Bukhari and Muslim. It is a place where the revelation came down, and it's the homeland of the prophets. So this is a well-known fact. And it is one of the mosques to which people may travel for longer distances. La tushaddu rihal, that you cannot come up or you cannot travel for the purpose of itikaf, which actually takes a long distance, except in the three mosques, that Masjid al-Haram in Mecca and Medina, plus the one of Masjid al-Aqsa. So Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he also prayed in this Masjid al-Aqsa. He led the prayers, and also we consider that as a very important aspect in Islam. Now, if you look at the conquest of Muslims, or the Muslim leadership, we see that during the time of Khalifa Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, Islam reached this region of Palestine under the hands of Abu Ubaidah Amir ibn al-Jarrah, the Muslim strong commander who died actually during this campaign. He was the Muslim commander of the army that conquered Palestine, and therefore Islam was brought there in the year 638. The subsequent regimes of Muslim leaders, when we are still under a unified Khilafah, also made contributions towards this place, especially the two mosques, Al-Aqsa and the Dome of the Rock Mosque. These two are supposed to be clarified. Masjid al-Aqsa is the place, or the masjid, where the messenger laid the prophets, and Dome of the Rock is where Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam ascended from the earth to the heavens. So these two places are in one place, and they are considered to be sacred, or they are considered to be haram. So these places were modified during the subsequent regimes of Muslim leaders, And Jerusalem, as we know, that later was conquered by other forces. And Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, one of the great Muslim commanders as well, and one of the what we can consider a straightforward and courageous Muslim leader, conquered it as well. And that was another important success for the Muslims of that time. And then later we had the Mamelukes and the Ottoman, and then the Uthman Empire, or the Khalifa that somehow collapsed during 1924, kept on administering these places until we lost. So this can be enough to tell us our attachment towards these places, and we should always be concerned about Palestine and these sacred places. So the control over Al-Aqsa and its neighborhood was only realized and maintained when the Muslims were under one leadership, and that's what we call Khilafah. And after the collapse of the Khilafah in 1924, unified leadership of Muslims was lost and ushered in an era of suffocation and divide and rule. So today the Muslim community is divided by the superpowers, allying with some and making others enemies. We are also divided under the religious divisions, sects, and so on. So today we are not in control of Al-Aqsa because of what you have already seen. Now, I have already given you the summary of the history, and now I'm just going to go through these slides quickly, because at least now you know that the declaration, the Balfour Declaration of 1917, was actually the precursor for whatever you see happening in Palestine today. And I am showing you those sources so that you can as well go and search for yourself. The important sources for the history of Palestine: Aljazeera.com. If you look at the section of features, you can find a very interesting article, more than a century, on the Balfour Declaration explained. It's a very important article that can give you the history. And then I've also looked at the United Nations Conference on Trade and UN, and you can see the link as well. You can find very important resources for this question. And then also www.britannica.com. It has all the subjects that you can be looking for. Now, based on the searches made, we see the Balfour Declaration, as I've already mentioned, that it was aimed at establishing a Jewish state in Palestine. And for them, they were calling it a national home for the Jewish people. And that is actually still going on, that, you know, Palestine is the home for the Jewish people. And that's why they are trying to kill everybody, or to kill the Palestinians, so that they can occupy it as per the objective of this declaration. It is attributed to Arthur Balfour, who was by then a foreign secretary, and it was addressed to Lionel Walter, who was the figurehead for the British Jews by then. Now, this declaration has, I think I have already mentioned that. Let me just take you to why was it made. And the reasons why this declaration was made, they can explain what you see happening today in Palestine. For example, the Zionists were lobbying British government to have an independent state. So it is what is happening today, that these guys are struggling to chase away or to kill all Palestinians so that they can occupy that as their homeland. That's number one. Number two, the anti-Semitic reasoning that giving Palestine to the Jews would be a solution. So the Jews were being discriminated, segregated, undermined in Europe. So by giving them Palestine was a solution to what was happening. But the biggest mistake which was made, that the land was not free. It was owned by other people. And that's what is causing the the worst situation that you see in Gaza today. The strategic imperial interest to keep Egypt and Suez Canal within Britain's sphere of influence. So if you create Israel where it is today, and you put it in the middle of, as we call it, Middle East, it could be, it's a very strategic position where Israel is, because you have the Mediterranean Sea, you have Syria there, you have Jordan, you have Egypt, and this is a strategic position linking to Europe. So this region was a strategic position, and up to now, the Western world wishes to have a strong country there called Israel, so that it can be able to neutralize or to balance the power of the Muslim world. So this was 1917, but you can look at it and appreciate or understand what is happening today. Britain also wanted Zionists to rally support among the Jews in the United States of America, in Russia, hoping that they could encourage their governments to stay in the war until victory, because this was during World War I. So Britain wanted the support of Zionists. They should be lobbying governments in the United States, in Russia, in order to stay in the war. So that was also underground. So these reasons why this declaration was made can help us to understand the current situation. And what was the impact of this Balfour Declaration? The impact, you can see, number one, that the British began to facilitate the immigration of European Jews to Palestine. And they started to empower them systematically as a future domineering group. In essence, Balfour Declaration promised Jews a land where the natives made up more than 90% of the population. You can see this mistake. You know, the Jews were promised a land which had just 90% of the people were not actually, in other words, the land was occupied. And there were a few Jews who were constituting around 10%. So 90% of the people were all disregarded to be nothing. So it is automatically, the declaration sparked off resistance from indigenous population until today. So the declaration had impact, and we are still seeing the consequences of this declaration. So the British mandate created conditions for the Jewish minority to gain superiority in Palestine. They built their state themselves at the expense of the Palestinians. So it was the precursor to the 1948 Palestinian Nakba, when the Zionist armed groups who were trained by British forcibly expelled more than 750 Palestinians from their homelands. And that I've already explained that Palestinians were forced out of Palestine to that tune of 750 in number. When the British decided to terminate their mandate in 1947 and transfer the question of Palestine to United Nations, the Jews already had an army that was formed out of the armed paramilitary groups trained and created to fight side by side with British in World War II. So you can see that Britain was quite aware that the Jews were already armed and they had already been organized. They had administrative structures to take over this region. So the British allowed them to have self-governing institutions, and they prepared for them, of course. They prepared for them to take over. So Britain to go to the UN, it was already made. Everything was clear that now we have set the ground, let's go and formalize. Now, if you look at this map, and it is got from Al Jazeera, and we actually need to acknowledge the role of Al Jazeera media outlets for the awareness that they have created regarding the Palestinian issue. And if you ask me about the contributors to this cause, I would say Qatar as a country, Al Jazeera, they have really made a very tremendous or very huge contribution to the Palestinian cause. And up to now, we know that actually the leader of the Hamas or the head of the resistance is also being kept in Qatar. So if you look at the map, you see that was Palestine before. You can see Haifa, Jaffa, and Jerusalem. So you can see the green color, the Palestinian, and then the Jewish. The Jewish community was very minute. You can see from the map, and I think it's self-explanatory. Yeah, Ahmad. Yeah, Ahmad.
No.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Are the members able to look at this map?
Yes, they can clearly see what you are talking about.
Okay, so by October 31st, 1917, British forces conquered Palestine from the Ottoman Turks, ending that year of Islamic rule. And that was also something that I've already mentioned. But this map is very important for us to see how Palestine was, and then we shall see how it has been changed by the Zionists. 1948, when the the Jewish state was established, this is how things turned. You can see it is like the opposite. In the first map of 1917, you saw that the Jews or the Jewish community was actually minute. You could not even identify the color which was in that map. Now, in this map, you can easily see that it is the opposite. The green one is where you have now the Palestinians. We are confined to West Bank, which includes Eastern Jerusalem, and then Gaza. So these are the two places where they kept Palestinians. And now the biggest part of this map, you can see the blue is Israel. So during this 1948, we can say Declaration of Independence for the Jewish state, you can see the figures, the number of Palestinians who were forced out of their lands. You know, they moved out of the historic Palestine. So you can imagine really if you are owning land, you are owning property, and somebody forcefully comes, or somebody comes and takes it forcibly. So you can imagine the kind of injustice and also the anger that emanates out of that. Now, from 1947 to 1977, we can see the partition which was made, and you have already seen that map, which gives us three important aspects. You have Israel, you have Gaza, and you have West Bank. And West Bank, usually, it includes Eastern Jerusalem. They are not talking about Western Jerusalem. We shall see that in another map, because it was not so strategic. Eastern Jerusalem was very strategic because it has the holy sites, as we mentioned them. Now, over half of the Palestinian Arab Muslims population fled during 1948, and Jordan and Egypt controlled the rest of the territory assigned by Resolution 181 to the Arab state. So the places of West Bank and after 1948, Gaza was under Egypt, and then West Bank was under Jordan. So these two countries controlled Palestine. Now, in 1967, there was a war that was waged by Egypt, Syria, and this war, of course, United States came in and rescued Israel. So after this war, Israel took control of the occupied territory of Palestine. So the occupied territory now, we are considering West Bank and Gaza. They became actually areas of occupation by Israel after 1967. And that's why today you are hearing statements that we want Palestine to go back to the borders of before to the 1967 borders. 1967 means that, Gaza and West Bank with Eastern Jerusalem. So these are the places, the two places that make up Palestine. And this is what is wished to be the independent Palestine. So 1967 war brought about a second exodus of Palestinians, estimated to be around 500,000 Palestinians. They moved out of their lands to other places. So you have a lot of Palestinians spread around the world, and especially in the Muslim world, in the neighboring Muslim world. So then there was another war of 1973, which somehow intensified the hostilities in the region. And this war, what was very important about this war was that the Muslims at least somehow showed unity by having the oil blockade, that they stopped circulating or supplying oil to the Europe or to the European countries, and something that was very instrumental as solidarity with Palestinians. And this kind of solidarity is what the Israel and her allies have succeeded to dismantle. The solidarity of the Muslim world has been dismantled through a number of things, as we shall see later. Now, 1967, if you see the map very well, you can see that Israel occupies Gaza and the West Bank after the war, because they had already won the war and they had the upper hand to take over these areas. Gaza, they chased away Jordan because it was part of the war, and also from Gaza, they chased away Egypt. So this was a very sad moment where we see the occupation. So you see the map, the green color indicates Palestinian under Israel occupation. You can see the blue color indicating Israel, a very huge chunk of land, people who just came from Europe and they came as settlers and they took over the land. And you can see the gray Egyptian and Syrian land occupied by Israel. So the Egypt Sinai Peninsula, this was occupied by Israel in a way of trying to, it was like a buffer zone, which later even attracted the UN peacekeepers. And then Golan Heights, they were also occupied by Israel to block any kind of insurgency coming from Syria and other parts of Lebanon. So this is how Israel is enjoying supremacy in the region under the support of the United States and Europe as well. Now, from 1977, 1990, we can see, for example, the most important aspect in this period, the 1987 Intifada, which we can call as, the first kind of popular resistance against the occupation. This was, it came as a result of the suffocation that the Israel army was extending to the Palestinians. And the Palestinians also had or started to have a number of meetings even beyond borders to try and discuss the matter of having an independent state. But the details are actually quite extensive, and time might not allow us to go into all these details. But in summary, we can see that the first revolution, or what we can consider as a popular resistance, which is considered in many we can consider in literature as Intifada, 1987. It's a very important year when it comes to the history of Palestine. Then we come to Oslo Accord, which were actually somehow brought in a little relaxation of the Israel forces, and there were also efforts of President Yasser Arafat. And we see also Camp David agreements in 2001. But all these agreements, they were not fulfilled by Israel. If you want to know something about the Jews, from the history of Medina, you can easily recall how the Jews were behaving with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, entering into or signing agreements, and the next day they will breach them. So this has been the characteristic of them. And even up to today, if they sign agreements, they want to breach them. The next day they will breach the agreements. So that is very important to remember. So from 1993, 1995, Oslo Accords somehow brought Palestine, as you see from these maps. If you look at the green color indicates Palestinian under Israeli occupation. You can see that in the two maps of 18% and 22%, A and B. So they are spread around, but under Israel occupation. And then you can see Israel is enjoying the space. And then you can see area C, Palestinian under Israel control. So these are the areas, for example, in West Bank and Eastern Jerusalem. These areas, you will find roadblocks, you will have checkpoints, and your travel is approved by the Israel army. So the life in Palestine generally, since 1948, life is really a kind of prison life. It's prison life, as it's actually mentioned in many outlets, that Gaza Strip is actually the largest or the biggest prison in the world, open air prison, because the kind of life that people are living there is just equivalent to somebody in the prison. So if you compare now the situation where water, no electricity, no food, so people are starving. But whatever they are doing today is what actually happened to some of these Jews when they are still in Europe. So this is what I'm saying, that it's more of a retaliation to people who are innocent. You see, so the Jews did not do this to the Europeans. They just came with their anger, and they are actually unleashing it to the Palestinians. So these maps can easily tell you the extent of dominancy, the extent of land grabbing that happened in Palestine. If you also want to look at the illegal settlements, because illegal settlements is one of the big aspects in this Palestinian issue or Palestinian question. So you can see a number of people in West Bank. You see illegal settlements to a tune of 400 plus. And in Eastern Jerusalem, there has been there are a lot of resolutions, United Nations resolutions that were passed under UN, but these resolutions are not fulfilled, or they are not even implemented by Israel, and they do not stop Israel from constructing houses in these gazetted areas. So the map tells you the kind of the extent of land grabbing and illegal settlements that are causing chaos in the region. The other important map to look at is the map of Jerusalem. It's a divided city now. You can see Western Jerusalem, as I've told you, that it was not very attractive. So Eastern Jerusalem was of course, the most historical one, and that's where President Trump actually declared it as the capital of Israel. And I've just been watching a video where Netanyahu was saying that indeed, if a person does not know history, then he is the one who can blame us for making Jerusalem our capital. So President Trump came, and he was claiming that he came to make big things. And one of the big things he made was to declare Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. So they celebrated it. And it's one of the issues that one of the issues that are making the two-state solution a very difficult goal to achieve, because Palestinians were also looking at Jerusalem as their capital because of the sacred nature of this area. But Israel and the United States were very quick to declare it as the capital of Israel. Although they are still keeping Tel Aviv as their capital, but this is actually somehow taken up in a way of trying to suffocate the interests of Palestinians. So the map shows you Western Jerusalem and even the population. You can see about 354,000 Israelis are there and 5,000 Palestinians only in Western Jerusalem. In Eastern Jerusalem, Palestinians are more than the Israeli settlers. But the Palestinians who are living there are like people who are living in prisons because of the checkpoints and because everything is determined by Israel. Now, from 2000 to the present, you can see there was a second intifada when Ariel Sharon, he went to Al-Haram Sharif, and that's how it somehow sparked off a revolt that led to many Palestinians being killed. We see a number of aspects or a number of developments in terms of negotiations, Security Council resolutions, especially reaffirming the vision of two-state solution of Israel being an independent state and also Palestine. So these resolutions have been coming almost every year. And what you can also note that when there is any kind of violence or any kind of war, it will end with a resolution that reaffirms the establishment of two-state solution or the two states, but there is no follow-up to implement that kind of resolution. That's a map or a picture to show you the checkpoints. Israel checkpoints in occupied West Bank. You can see the red dots indicate the checkpoints. So today, if you are moving within West Bank, you must go through those checks. And even in Gaza, the Israel army and even the intelligence have cameras almost on every house to see whatever is happening. So the checkpoints, the surveillance cameras, and other aspects going on indicate that Palestinians have no any kind of freedom. The 16 years of Gaza under blockade, because from 2007, Gaza was surrounded by Israel, and everything was actually put to standstill because of the emergence of Hamas, as we shall see later. So this map or this graphical representation of what has happened in terms of happenings and the challenges of Gaza Strip. 2.3 million people and 45% unemployed or unemployment rate, food insecure households, 64%. And today, as we talk today, all these aspects we can say that are at zero because anyone can work. Everybody is expecting a bomb to come. So you can imagine, no power, no water. And we can also see timelines for the bombardments that have been taking place since 2008. There was bombardment in 2008. It lasted for 23 days. 2012, we have 80 days. 2014 lasted for 50 days. And all these, of course, go with a lot of people dying. So this is what you can see in Gaza. And the map also tells you, or it can easily show you how Gaza looks like. Northern Gaza, you have Gaza City, Deir al-Bala, and then Khan Yunis and Rafah. Rafah is where you have the border with Egypt. Now, the human cost from 2008 and today, of course, you can see Palestinian death that is coming to that, and Israel death you can see. And you really wonder. Now, the Hamas in Gaza. Hamas, as we can hear, this word is an Arabic word, Hamas, from the meaning of zeal. You know, it's an important aspect to talk about today because it's a resistance movement that emerged in 1987 after the first Intifada. That the revolt or the kind of demonstration that people were expressing their anger emerged in 1987. And out of that, this Hamas movement rose up in order to create resistance in a formal way. So it started in a way of actually social work, and later the military wing was established. So it started to do social welfare activities, including food distribution during Ramadan and building schools, hospitals. And it became so popular in the eyes of Palestinians to the extent that when it came to elections in 2006, they were able to win majority of the seats in parliament. And they became a political force that was able to take over Gaza from Al-Fatah. So Hamas was founded by Sheikh Ahmad Yassin and his aide Abdul Aziz Al-Rantisi. So this movement was an offshoot of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. And later, in 2017, they declared that they were an independent movement away from the Muslim Brotherhood. That was in 2017. So the Hamas leader, of course, was advocating for the rights of Palestinians against the Israeli occupation in Gaza, West Bank, and even Eastern Jerusalem, and was critical Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority was really talking about negotiations that were not yielding any results. That's why they were in clash between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, or PLO, because PA, or Palestinian Authority, was against armed resistance, which is actually mentioned to be the only answer for the Jews, that they cannot understand negotiations. They can only understand the bullet. So the Palestinian Authority took over, or they were actually in control of West Bank, and then Gaza was under Hamasi because majority of the people were in favor of Hamasi for their leadership capabilities of running their affairs. Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, in 2003, he called for a ceasefire talks as well, and he also called for the establishment of Palestinian state under the borders of 1967. So 1967 borders are the borders that everybody is talking about to be the borders in which Palestine should be established, or under which Palestine should be established, where you have Gaza Strip, West Bank, including Eastern Jerusalem. So these are the demands of Palestinians in terms of their leaders. Now, in 2004, Ahmad Yassin was assassinated at the age of 67. He was coming from Salat al-Fajr in the morning, and he was actually bombed by an Israeli drone. So later, Rantisi took over, and then other leaders came about until Ismail, who is now the head of Al-Hamas group. So the Qassam Brigade is the military wing of Al-Hamas. It was established in 1992 to support the objective of armed resistance against Israel occupation. Al-Qassam Brigade was attributed to a freedom fighter who was called Izzuddin Al-Qassam. He was, of course, persecuted by Europeans from Syria, and then he came to Palestine, and he led the revolution, or the revolts of Palestinians to rise against the British rule in Palestine in 1935, he was killed or he was assassinated. So the name of Al-Qassam was attributed to him because of his earlier efforts to fight for the rights of Palestinians in form of resistance. So brothers, I think, and sisters in Islam, if you look at Hamas and Fatah, Al-Fatah is actually the political party that is now heading West Bank. In terms of differences, you can see that Hamas is preferring the use of Islamic values in terms of leadership, but Al-Fatah is more of a secular organization. In terms of strategy towards Israel, Hamas is actually talking about armed resistance, is what Israel can understand. And Al-Fatah, they are believing in negotiations. And that's why we have seen quite a number of negotiations taking place in different countries, but yielding no results. In terms of objectives, Hamas does not recognize Israel, but accepts a Palestinian state on the 1967 borders. And Fatah recognizes Israel and wants also to build an independent Palestinian state. Now, getting to what is happening today in Gaza, you can see people who are being removed from the rubble. Very disgusting kind of images that you're looking at today. If you see now people who are buried in mass graves, you cannot even have the formal way of burying people. You can see they are being buried by caterpillars or graders. You can see that image on the left. Now you see a nurse is writing on the body, is writing on somebody who has died, just to write the details so that maybe people can be able to identify this particular person. So a nurse is writing on the body of someone. Look at these images. People are dying on a daily basis. See one of the brothers who was actually bidding farewell to the mother in order to go and fight the Jews. So bombardment of Gaza, you look at that left-hand side, you see how Gaza is looking like today. Gaza is like that now. You can see somehow something like beyond reconstruction if you look at that image. And then on your right-hand side, you can see Al Jazeera journalist who died, who was bombarded, who was actually bombed in Gaza, and they are praying for him. You can see the prematures. They are being transferred from one hospital to another to Rafah. So actually, they were being transferred to Rafah. We don't know whether they really survived. And you can see a mother and her child, they are injured. So these are the kind of images that do not bring any kind of sympathy from the eyes of the Israel government and the supporters. Now, success amidst tears and grief. Now, the courage and willingness of Palestinians to die for the cause is something that we can consider as success. To be martyrs, and in jihad, we know that it is either success or martyrdom. And Nasr or Shahada. So this is one thing that we are really praising our brothers and sisters in Palestine. The other important aspect that we need to know that casualties on this Israel side is hidden but very significant. That they are dying in multiple or in numbers, huge numbers. And it's one of the reasons why they are keeping on, they are continuing with the war out of frustration because of the damage that they have actually registered so far. Israel has lost public opinion globally, and Palestinian question has become more prominent in the entire world. You have seen that in the media, social media, and even the mainstream media, the kind of demonstrations taking place all over the world. A lot of voices calling for ceasefire. They are around the world. So Israel has lost public opinion all over the world and has never happened before. Israel is also more insecure today than before. It's more insecure today. And these are some of the things that are disturbing Netanyahu. Now, quickly, as we come towards the end of this presentation, that the contributors, the Palestinians as a whole, Palestinians have really fought the enemy on our behalf, and they are really the main contributors. We must register our, we make this acknowledgement officially that Palestinians as a whole, they have really been very courageous and vigilant, and they are still, their patience, their faith and zeal to encounter the enemy has been actually very, we can say, historical. Hamas and the armed unit, the Qassam Brigade, they have actually been a contributing factor because if you see some of the resistance movements or some of the attempts made somehow led to fruitful discussions and negotiations because of the Hamas and their armed unit. PLO, especially the efforts of Yasser Arafat, who died in 2004, he was also poisoned, so considered as a shaheed. It was in the same year when Ahmad Yassin was assassinated, and Arafat was also advocating for martyrdom in many of his speeches. And although they had some clashes here and there with Al-Hamas because of differences in the approaches, but we consider his contributions. We cannot actually just rule out his contribution. The Muslim leaders of 1970s who endeavored to confront Israel militarily, the leaders in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the leaders in Jordan and Syria, these are leaders of the time. For example, we remember King Faisal of Egypt, of King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. Those are very, very instrumental leaders in 1970s who were able to somehow show solidarity with Palestinians. And if we had such caliber of leaders, possibly today, we would see something very different. Countries like Qatar giving protection to resistance leaders like Ismail Haniyeh, who is the leader of Hamas, and championing fruitful negotiations. Qatar is really credited for their contribution for what is happening now. Al Jazeera as a media outlet, we really get all what we see happening in Gaza from Al Jazeera. Other countries like Turkey, they are also making contribution. Yemen, Algeria, Chad, South Africa, Malaysia, Iran, Brunei, Jordan, Kuwait, Egypt, they are doing contributions, although their contributions vary. By the way, the country that would have been very, very instrumental, two countries that would have been very instrumental, Jordan and Egypt, because these are countries that had even control of Palestine, but in 1967 they lost that. Egypt, a good leader in Egypt would really cause trouble to Israel. And that's why United States of America with Israel, they fought, of course, to remove Mohammed Morsi, who had become a leader in 2013 in prison and later died in prison, because they knew that such a leader would really be a very huge obstacle to the success of Israel. So you need very good leaders in Egypt, you need good leaders in Jordan, you need good leaders in Syria, the countries that are surrounding Palestine. If you have very good leaders there, possibly you would see something very different. I have also seen a list of countries that have cut or withdraw, they have withdrawn their ambassadors from Israel, like Bahrain, Belize, Chad, Chile, Colombia, Jordan, Honduras, Bolivia. These are also courageous countries that can really stand against the US and her allies. Al Jazeera, I've already spoken about that. They have really done a very good job in raising awareness about these atrocities And Al Jazeera, if you remember, also the Afghan war in 2001, they were very, very instrumental. They have also been instrumental in 2003, the war in Iraq, despite the fact that, you know, it was having elements of the Western, you know, influence, but their work has been really very, very tremendous, and we can credit their contribution. Journalists in Gaza and elsewhere, Palestinians in the diaspora, medical workers, you have seen many video footages indicating the works of the medical workers, nurses, who are not fearful of being bombed, and they go on duty to save life. So these are really heroes of this century. Bloggers, social media users, religious personalities, especially those based in Western world, they have been doing a very good job. We also have the boycott, divestment and sanctions, BDS movement. This movement started, and it's very beautiful in many countries, especially in Europe and even in Asia. There are products, and they have apps that are identifying the products, Jewish products, and people are now avoiding them. Here in Pakistan, for example, in the university where I am, they have issued a notification or a circular banning all the Jewish products in canteens, and for example, Nestle products, they are all prohibited in the university. So this way, you are making a contribution towards Palestinians, because the Jewish companies are collecting a lot of money to go and support their government, so that their government can do more atrocities in Palestine. So the boycott effort is one of the aspects that we need to consider as a way forward. Influential politicians in the Western world, philanthropists also working in Gaza and West Bank, including even some Christians, once they come out of Gaza and they see, they come and report the atrocities and also the patience and courage of Palestinians. So these stories have also been good to the rest of the world to understand what is really happening. So our role, most especially our young brothers and sisters in universities, because we know that the young people in universities, they are considered as the pillars of this nation, the pillars of this ummah. And as one of the great scholars said, I think it was Tariq Suwaidani, he said that if you want to look at the future, or if you want to predict the future of any society, look at its youth. So the youth who we are now addressing today, you are university students, you are the future of this ummah. And your role, what I'm talking about, is your role. University students can make a very big contribution towards the Palestinian cause. Number one, perfection of our iman through intensive acts of ibadah in order to attract Allah's mercy. Because if you look at the success of Muslim armies, the Muslims as a community in history, the success was attributed to the nature or to the caliber of the Muslims of those generations. For example, one time, it was Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. He was the leader of the Muslim army during the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah. He said one time that the mistake of the Muslim army is worse than the enemy himself. What does it imply? It implies that if we Muslims are making mistakes, disobeying Allah, we become worse than the enemy, because the enemy is already known that he's not a Muslim. He's doing all the mischief in the world. So if we do the mistakes like the enemy, then we are worse. So the first step, my brothers and sisters in Islam, we must perfect ourselves to be good Muslims who will be worth of Allah's mercy and protection. 2, extensive dua and strong hope in Allah's help. We should not lose hope. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that we should not lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has given us very many tests, and Even the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam during the battle of Al-Khandaq, the Muslims were coming to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Mata Nasrullah, and he was telling them, Ala inna nasrallahi qarib. The Master of Allah is coming, is near. Be patient. So extensive dua together with strong hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the powers over whatever is happening. So we should not look at the supremacy of the United States. We should not only look at the Israel and its military capacity to think that no, Palestinians cannot win this war or cannot actually get independence. For example, Israel embarked on the bombardment of Gaza with an objective of just to completely erode or erase Hamas. And they thought it would be one week or 2 weeks. But up to now, the Muslim resistance movement is still giving them hard time. And it's partly because of what is your du'as. You are praying for them. And many people, many good people are praying. And you consider yourself also to be a good Muslim. And of course, you know yourself very well. Perfect yourself so that you can be confident of yourself. Raising awareness about Palestinian question through seminars and media campaigns. So the young people in many parts of the world are doing that through social media platforms. They have opened up groups where they are sharing all these atrocities happening. Although there are some limitations on some social media platforms like Facebook, some videos are really censored and they are blocked. But at least that does not stop you from using TikTok, Twitter, and other social media platforms. Boycotting all the Jewish products, it is already happening in many parts of the world, and it is impacting them. The Jews are more insecure now. After this kind of war, you can actually expect a lot more problems for Netanyahu and his government. Donations in case of if you have any chance of extending donations, you should be doing. In the university where I am, there was, in November 17th, we had a demonstration and we had a campaign of students organizing a seminar, or seminars. Actually, they organized about 3 seminars, students of different clubs and societies. And they were also able to put up a stall for everybody who wanted to buy some items and also to donate money freely. They were selling flags. The jacket that I'm putting on currently is also a jacket that was bought during this campaign. It has the flag of Pakistan as well as the flag of Palestine. We had even the scarf of Palestine being sold, and people were buying them in huge numbers in order to make a contribution. The money that was sold or the money that was got was extended to Palestinians who are in need. Students, you can do a lot. Donations, offering scholarships to Palestinian children. Now, in universities, because now I know that many of you are still young, but these ideas, we are speaking about them. You never know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise you very fast and you become people of responsibility in universities. Offering scholarships to Palestinians is now, it should be one of the steps towards empowering Palestinians wherever they are. Inshallah, one time they will be going back to Palestine as a country when they are well empowered. Scholarships to Palestinians is one of the ways we can actually do a very tremendous job towards the Palestinians. Now, my conclusions, because I know that Mr. Ahmad, I don't know whether he was just afraid of telling me that time is over. He has not given me any warning that either my time is over or I have 2 minutes to go. Yeah, Ahmad, are you still here? Oh, okay. Now, my conclusions. One, the owners of the Israel project are determined towards its sustainability. So that's one of the important points to note. The owners of the Israel project are determined towards its sustainability. If you look at Biden, if you look at Blinken, if you look at what is happening in Europe, I did not share with you something in Germany. I have a friend of mine who was telling me that things are very, tight in Germany. That journalists are meant to, they are forced actually to say that Hamas is a terrorist organization. They are forced to, even the stories that are written about this war, they are edited by 3 editors so that they are sure that whatever is being to be aired is what the German government wants. So a lot is happening, even media censorship. Censorship of media is one of the anti-democratic values, but these are things that are happening in the West today. So the war, the ongoing war in Gaza has changed many things, which we knew before that, they were actually conventional things like democracy and even the democratic values like freedom of expression. So it's no more in Europe today, and even in the USA. You have seen even stories of the president of Harvard University is being almost censored, and another university, I think it was in the forgotten the university, but it was in the United States. The chancellor or the president of the university resigned over the anti-Semitic sentiments. So the world is changing just because of this war. So the Muslims ought to do the same about our support for the resistance and justice in Palestine. So since the owners of the project are determined, the Muslims should also not relax. So we should not relax in any way. We should keep the spirit of Palestine vibrant in our minds, in the minds of our children, in the minds of the young students like you who are listening to me. You must be very vibrant about Palestine. The Muslim Ummah has all what is required to liberate Palestine. However, lack of unity, selfish interests of the leaders of the Muslim countries, and the economic, political, and military agendas of OIC member states are still a huge barrier to this liberation. So we already talked about 1973 oil embargo. That was a very important step, and it worked. So even today, we can still do it, even not opening airspace to some of the countries that are supporting Israel. These are all possible things, but it seems that there's something that we need to work out. Work out on our iman. We shall be able to gain the glory that we had before. The Jews will fight you, and you will prevail. The Jews will fight you, and you will prevail over them. Then a rock will say, "O Muslim, here is a Jew behind me, kill him." Hadith by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. So it means that we must be hopeful that there will be a time when the Jews will kneel down. The hour will not begin until the Muslims fight the Jews, and the Muslims will kill them, until a Jew hides behind a rock or a tree, and the rock or a tree will say, "O Muslim, O slave of Allah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him," except the gharqad, a thorny tree, for it is one of the trees of the Jews. So my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, this slide marks the end of my talk. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive the mistakes that I've committed during my presentation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pardon my gaps. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the strength to support and even fight for the rights of the oppressed people. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strengthen our iman so that we can be people worth of being assisted by his angels. We see that in the Battle of Badr, that the Muslims were supported by the angels coming and even fighting within the battle. So we need to work on our iman. Jazakumullah khairan. Back to you, Mr. Ahmad, my brother.
Jazakumullah khair, our brother Sheikh Mpoza, for the presentation you have delivered to this group of young professionals, majority of whom are university students. I also thank them for the attention they have given your presentation. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept your contribution
Allahumma ameen.
and their attention. Allahumma ameen. Dear brothers, those who are here and those online, we call for your participation, a few questions and contributions, if any, and then we wind up, inshallah. Okay, we are going to use the other microphone with Hassan. Those who are online, please mute. Yes, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So, while the Sheikh was delivering the information, he reached a certain ayah where he was saying that Ya qawmi dakhulu al-ard al-muqaddasata allati kataba Allah lakum. And he was like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling Nabiullah Musa alayhi salam to tell the Israelites to enter that holy land. So is it that they are now saying that they have to enter that land and fight for it, and those one are the people whom they were to fight for, to fight with?
Sure. Yes, got your point. Sure.
Sheikh Posa will request that you note down the questions and then wind them up.
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
As we were here to the information that was being delivered by the Sheikh, we got to know that historically the Jews, before they came into the area that they are fighting for right now, they were in Europe. And during that time, we have seen that there was a lot of participation by the Nazis that used to persecute the Jews. So in this time, as if they are trying to revenge, they're trying to put what they went through onto other people. But when I also look into the history, I saw that the Germans were one of the people in Germany. It is where the Jews suffered most. And during the time of Hitler, Adolf, he killed them. Most of them used to kill them a lot. And he once put up a statement that if it was not for the reason that I want to other people to notice why I killed the Jews, I wouldn't have left any. But because I want other people to also see the reason why I killed them, that's why I've spared some.
Mm.
So I don't know if I combine it with the hadith that we have seen that was delivered, that there is the Jew behind me, and it was stating, kill him. Is it just by nature that the Jews are bad-hearted? I don't understand. So I want to get clear image about that.
Okay, sure. Yes, the question is registered. Please go ahead with other people who are asking.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We thank for the wonderful presentation. I would like to clarify more on the point whereby they say that there is a difference between the Jews and the Zionists. Well, who are the Zionists and who are the Jews?
Gotcha.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam
My
wa
concern
rahmatullahi.
is it has been a safe for everyone, for every person getting a microphone is talking about unity. So, as our presenter said, to clarify and tell us some more information and clarity on what these other brothers have done
so far, because we've seen in America people are rioting. Then what are our brothers doing in Saudi Arabia? Those most Islamic countries, what have they done so far? We need to get more information about that, because already in Uganda we have it is more than that. At least in Uganda, it's a war between the Muslims and the Muslims. At least it's better in Palestine, whereby those are non-Muslims and Muslims. So I think for Uganda, it's better for dua. But what are our brothers doing in Saudi Arabia and the other countries? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Are we done with the question? Umar, you can mute. Let's give chance to our presenter to respond to some of the questions, and there is also some questions in chat room. I hope our presenter will look at them and answer them all together. Thank you, sir.
Yes, you will help me to get them from the chat room, because I was not focusing on them. So just get them for me and put them to my attention. Okay, number one, brother who asked first, he was asking about the Jews when actually the Israelites who were told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that idkhulul al-ard al-muqaddasati allati kataba Allahu lakum. It is not the Jews of today that Allah was mentioning. He was mentioning the believing for the followers of Musa alayhi salam. And this is something that we need to clarify even regarding Masjid al-Aqsa, that the current Christians and even the Jews are claiming ownership, that it was built by Yaqub, who is the father of Israelites, but he was building it for the believers. You know, how the current Jews today are not believing in Allah, they are not believing in Islamic monotheism. So therefore, the ayah was referring to the Jews or to the followers of Musa at that time, that Allah was telling them to enter into that place. And for your information, that there were also Jews who were living side by side with Muslims and Christians in Palestine, even before Islam came to that region. And even when Islam came to that region, the Muslims practiced their Islam and the Jews were also there, and even the Christians, and they were living there peacefully. But that takes me to the question of somebody who was asking about the Jews. The Jews, these are the people who are following Judaism as a religion. And then the Zionists are the people or a movement of people who are believing that, you know, the Jews are a superior race that deserves an independent state. And that kind of movement, it's the one that actually called for the establishment of a Zionist state or Jewish state, where everything is Jewish in nature and so on. And those are the people who came to replace or to displace the Palestinians currently. So that's the difference. The Jews, these are the people religiously believing in Judaism. And then the Zionists are the people or the movement of people who are believing in the independent state or the Jewish state that has all the aspects, applicable, or the aspects run according to the Jewish teachings. Now, that was the first question of Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 21. Then the Jews are doing a revenge. My brother was asking, and he was also quoting the aspects of Hitler, that he left some of the Jews for us to know how dangerous were they. How dangerous were these people? You are right in your conclusion and observation, indeed, that the Jews, even if you look at Quran, in Surah Ma'idah, Allah talks about them, that تَجِدَنَّ أَشَدَّ النَّاسِ عَدَاوَةً لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الْيَهُودُ وَالَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا. So the people who have the worst enmity towards the believers are the Yahud, the Jews. So their enmity is quite prominent, in Quran is mentioned, and it is also clear that they are people who don't consider any other person to be a human being. And where they are, actually they are so segregative, they know each other, they only want to promote their own ideologies. So because of this kind of, or because of these tendencies, they were persecuted in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, in those years of Hitler and others. So their behaviors and their isolation as a group and thinking that they are superhumans somehow made them to be very, very problematic wherever they were. And up to today, of course, they are feared because what they are doing, they are strategic in nature, they are excellent in technology, they are excellent in military, they are excellent in business. So they have excelled in everything. There is a statement that minority survives through excellency. So the Jews have excelled in every aspect, so that to the extent that they have taken over almost everything strategic. And that's what has made them to be actually more arrogant, because they have everything. They have secrets of people. They have capacity to kill. They have capacity to defame. So because of their behavior, they become actually very dangerous human beings. I think that it was just in agreement with your observation, and I have just added a few points to yours. And then my brother was talking about unity of Muslims and Uganda, that, Muslims are fighting one another. Of course, the fighting of one another is not only in Uganda. Even here in Asia, you will find the fighting of groups based on either religious teachings or on ideologies. So that is really typical of society that has people. But the important question that you raised, that why we are not seeing much of demonstrations in the Middle East or in the Muslim world today, is something that I can respond to. That much of what we see happening in the Arab world, you specifically mentioned Saudi Arabia, that these are countries that are somehow tied by their leaders. They are tied by their leaders. You have even seen, for example, the imams of the Haram al-Haram in Mecca and Medina. They are being actually censored on what kind of prayers that they should make for Palestinians. So these countries have leaders who have their own agendas and targets that they cannot disobey. I did not talk about the normalization movement that somehow was promoted by Netanyahu recently, that several countries, including Saudi Arabia, they are supposed to sign normalization treaties with Israel in order to keep off from the Palestinian issue, so that Palestinian issue is forgotten. So these were issues that I think you are aware, my dear brothers and sisters. So part of the silence you are seeing today is part of that normalization movement that Netanyahu had already started with the Arab world, most especially the countries that make up the Arab League. So that's why you are not seeing much of such demonstrations in Saudi Arabia. You can see some in Kuwait. You can also see some in North Africa, but not in Morocco, for example. You can see that in Algeria and even in Chad, that has even withdrawn its ambassador. But in Saudi Arabia, you might not see that, because bin Salman had already reached a lot of agreements with the American companies, Israeli companies, for economic development of Saudi Arabia, so that it can become more of another Dubai in the region. So the Vision 2030 somehow has made bin Salman to do a lot of things, including inviting European artists to come in Saudi Arabia. You are aware of the football. You are aware of many developments in Riyadh that are taking place in order to modernize Saudi Arabia and to have a sort of revolution to move away from the conservative Islam that was known to that region into what they consider to be the modern Islam. So these are some of the things that are very important for you to appreciate in order to know why certain countries are silent and why others are vocal. So I think I have answered your question that in the countries where you don't see any kind of voices towards Palestine, they are under the control of the United States and Israel. They have either secret agreements that they have signed, which are of course out of public, but even some are known. You know, through research, you could find some of those closed door agreements made, especially economic interests are really very huge. You know, economic interests are very huge to the extent that you find a lot of write-ups and even video clips showing how countries like Saudi Arabia and Turkey are somehow in conflict of which one should really work with Israel on the oil that should be transported to Israel and Europe. So very complex matters, my brother. I think those were 4 questions that were put to me, Mr. Ahmad. Maybe you can now raise a few other questions from the chat room.
There was one in the chat room. It was asking how can someone recognize Jewish products in Uganda?
Jewish products in Uganda. Unfortunately, I'm not in Uganda today, but there is Mr. Ayub, I think, should be aware of an app. There is already an app which you can now use on mobile phones. You just scan the bar. There is you know, this you scan the number and it will actually indicate whether this is Jewish or not. That application is available. I think I will look for it and share it with you so that you can share with the brothers as well. I will ask somebody here and then I will share with you and then you share with the brothers before the camp ends. When is it ending? Tomorrow?
Tomorrow in the morning.
Oh, okay. Let me do some search and then I will let you know, inshallah, regarding that.
Inshallah.
But the Jewish products in Uganda, Mr. Menya Ayub, I thought that he had that application. Or Haji Sekalima.
We are going to look for it as you are also searching for it.
Yes, inshallah.
Probably we shall share.
Inshallah.
Now, Dr. Mpoza, your concluding remarks?
Yes, the concluding remarks, just in line with the self-purification is one of the themes that I'm actually emphasizing these days, that we really need to clean up ourselves. Because what you see happening, the strength of the Muslim Ummah is about individuals. And the individuals make up the community. And the community, once the community is good, then it will be a resistant movement towards the enemies of Islam. So it's really my message to the young Muslim brothers and sisters listening to me, that we need to empower ourselves with the iman that is required through good actions. We need to be good enough so that we can be able to attract the mercy of Allah, and to have also pure understanding and clear understanding of our deen, so that we are not misguided by any kind of waves that are coming. If, for example, you have seen how people have come up to say that you should not support Hamas, you should not pray for the Palestinians, because this is, you know, the proper understanding of our deen should really come to priority number 1, that I need to understand my deen. Because some of my brothers who are there in the camp, they possibly come from schools that are not Muslim founded, and they have not got an opportunity to study Islam from the Islamic schools. So my message to all of you is really to have self-initiatives to learn this deen and become empowered Muslims who understand your deen. And today, alhamdulillah, the internet has really helped us a lot to have very good resources. If you are guided on those resources, because not every resource on the internet can be useful, but Alhamdulillah, they are very good sources. If you are guided, you can do self-teaching or self-learning. It's very important because we need good Muslims who should make good families, and good families will make very good communities. And once we have very good communities, then we shall be able to resist what we see today as the weaknesses and even the waves or the conspiracies that my brother Qasim was talking about prior to my presentation. So clear understanding of our deen, very good practice of our deen, and also participation in dawah. My brothers and sisters who are listening to me, especially in Uganda, there is a move, or there are some students in schools and universities who think that dawah is something that that should be done by some people who are wiseacre. I see that in many secondary schools, especially Islamic schools, that many of the young brothers and sisters hate dawah just because there are people who are doing it in a wrong way. So my message to you, young Muslim brothers in the universities, please, you must be very good, active dawah workers by calling upon your fellow colleagues or fellow students to be good as well. So participation in dawah activities should be part of your goals in life, that you are a professional teacher, but also a practitioner of dawah in a way that when you are in a school, you should be doing dawah to influence the environment where you are. Because a Muslim, wherever you are, that environment must be worked upon so that it is good. If you are good, then you create a good environment near you. So that is your assignment as our Muslim brothers and sisters in universities. Do participate in dawah activities, actively participate in dawah activities, and don't hate them because they are people who are doing it in the wrong way. And specifically, my brother Ahmad, the problem of our students or our young brothers in secondary schools, they are saying, if you are a dawah worker in a secondary school or university, that you are working on behalf of the school to spy for them, to report the ones who are who are doing some misconducts or who are misbehaving at school. So that way, some people begin to hate dawah. But we should understand dawah as a very broad concept, because we know that is an obligation to every Muslim. Once you understand something, practice it, and then call others towards it. We should be making a lot of dua for ourselves and even for our brothers in Palestine, and even in other places that Ahmad talked about, in China, in Kashmir, and in other countries where Muslims are persecuted. We need to pray for ourselves as well. We need to maintain a very good program with Quran, because Quran is like food on a daily basis. If you don't eat, you will not survive. So if you don't keep yourself with Quran, then you will not survive as a Muslim. How will you survive? A Muslim without Quran, a Muslim without dhikr, adhkar, every morning, every evening, every place you reach, you must be reciting some dua. So these are tips and my concluding remarks to my dear Muslim brothers and sisters in universities, that we need to have a vibrant Muslim students body in Uganda that will transform things and also perfect our society. We need a society that is very active, and the nation is waiting for such people. The corruption you see in governments, the corruption you see in everywhere, it needs a young generation of you in universities to rise up, and you cannot rise up if you are also like them. So you must be a good one. So my message to you, young brothers and sisters, be good to cause change. Jazakumullah khairan. And I am apologizing I must have talked a lot really, but let me hope that what I have really shared is useful to myself and you as well. Back to you, Mr. Brother Ahmad.
Now, Jazakumullah khairs. We are sincerely grateful to the time you have sacrificed for this cause. I understand you have not been able to break your fast as you do have been, because you had to want to prepare and then have this presentation delivered. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept your fasting and all what you have deliberated on today. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to time you have sacrificed and the rest of the members who have been part of this presentation. We thank you so much. We call off this presentation. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu